Look, it's no secret that research is severely flawed when it comes to medical education. It is very much a game that has been hyper optimized and is no longer about progressing the scientific body of knowledge, but rather just a means to an end, a game to play to maximize your competitiveness for medical school or for residency. There are some changes coming up for residency, which are going to be changing that equation a little bit, but maybe not as much as I think most people think. So let's dive into that process here.
What if you don't fully master it? Do you go back or
If it comes up again in future practice questions, then yes. But if it's one of those things where like you're going to try to study it right now for 15, 20, 30 minutes, do your flashcards, do your whatever mental models and mnemonics and stuff that you want to draw for yourself, and then you drop it and you move on to the next thing.
okay.
So, and then if it comes up again in your practice questions and your practice tests, then you can review it again in whatever depth. You're now getting a better idea as to how deeply you need to know it because you don't need to know every single detail of the various adolescent or childhood stages.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So when getting into cards, I would want you to work with someone who's actually matched into cardiology or at least another competitive IM specialty. But yes, like research is, um, dude, research is such a
It's like an arms race.
scam, dude. It's
Yeah,
such a fucking scam. And
I know.
like, it's a game. Did the research I did or you did or any other med student actually change medical practice? No,
No.
there's one example of a med student. I think it was like heparin from the 1930s or something. Okay, that med student actually did some shit. So Jay McLean is this medical student who in 1915 was doing medical student research and actually discovered heparin. Of course, that was significantly contributing to the scientific knowledge. Although when he later became an attending, he stopped doing research and was no longer contributing to that scientific body. Although again, significant contributions as a med student. So that's the exception more so than the rule. How long did you work on research to get your 18?
My one project took 3 years because it's primary manuscript. I basically had to scrub the internet for players that got injured. It was like a like players that got shoulder injuries and then
Did
surgery
you
and
have
then
other med students, junior med students, or pre-meds help you with that?
no.
That was a mistake. And the reason I say this was a mistake is that there are multiple tactics you can stack on top of one another to meaningfully increase your research output. With quality research, I think there's a misconception that a high quantity of very low quality research moves the needle, and I would say it's a high quantity of medium to high quality research that moves the needle. And when I say medium quality, we're still looking at actual research studies, not just a bunch of case reports. But when I say medium, not high, I'm meaning that they're not necessarily actually advancing science in the way that many of us would have hoped. So when you start leveraging teams around you and you start sharing responsibility, you can very much multiply your research output. And there is strategy here because you don't want to just have a ton of publications where you're just the third author. But if you do this strategically, you can meaningfully increase your number of first, second, and third author publications in a meaningful way, and then also get more presentations and abstracts out of that as well. Going back to research, so for internal medicine, what I would focus on if I were you, because you also want to do well during your intern year. You don't want to be the one who's like bumbling around and like you're getting poor evals, you do poor in your in service. So my philosophy is that you can't max out everything. Like if I max out my step three score at the expense of other things, that's not going to be optimal. But I want to optimize things at a reasonable level. So it's like that pursuit of excellence broadly, rather than saying that I want to maximize just one single thing. So if I were you, I would just do UWorld for step three, use that to get a strong score. Um, you'll have to determine, like for you, you'll probably, like I went through only one third or one quarter of UWorld. I was like, I just need to hit pass, and then I got a higher score than I wanted, and I was like, mother, I overstudied. That was time wasted that I could have spent doing other things. It obviously didn't matter for me because I ended up leaving. But so for step three, I'd probably just go through probably the whole QBank. You want to get involved with the research. Yeah, so going back to research, research is a game. Research is it's an arms race, like you mentioned. And out of 18, with only 2 accepted and a third that's in the works, I would have loved to see that number higher. I think that would have meaningfully improved your chances. What I would suggest, we do have a research program that can there's 3 of us that made our research curriculum. each of us had 60 plus items by the time we started med school with, dozens plus publications. So I had 26 publication, or sorry, 29 publications, and the other 37 were abstracts and presentations and such. So that's not because I'm some like savant, right? It's because I spent 3.5 years as an undergrad, got 1/3 author, like most pre-meds. You don't know what you're like, just go and go out, um, ask what to do, and try to do your best, and then you just cross your fingers and hope for the best. Not a reliable strategy. So later on, I started learning about delegating tasks and collaborating on tasks. I learned about how you can actually approach research in a way where you can ask the question, create the study, have a draft manuscript, show that to your PI. They're impressed, they're happy. Like there's all these more advanced tactics that just accelerate. Um, I want you to accelerate your research output if you really want to do something like cardiology. That's going to be a big part. I want you to do well on your in-service. I want you to have really good relationships. I want you to impress your attendings, which means you need to be quite competent, right? You can't just spend all your time on research and not really know what you're doing on the wards and just be bumbling around.
So Shaunak here is actually a DO who's about to start internal medicine residency, and he wants to go into cardiology. And that's why a lot of this conversation is also focused on how to best position himself for a cardiology fellowship. You can actually find his channel, Dr. Shack, linked below. Now, a lot of students are concerned about these new ERAS changes and how it changes the research landscape. And many people are hoping that it's going to move things in the right direction, where it's less about quantity and more about quality. But I want to share one very key insight with you that I don't think many students are aware of. Many residency programs already have these internal methods of assigning scores and quantifying your overall research. So looking at things like, are these case reports or not? Are you first author or not? Are these publications or not? What's the impact factor? This tends to matter more for residency than for medical school, because of course, when you're in residency, you're applying to one specialty, and within that specialty, they know the different journals and the relative strengths, the impact factor of each of these journals. So keep that in mind. There is this misconception that you can either do high quantity or high quality research, and now with these new ERAS changes, it's only going to be high quality. Everyone's volume is going to collapse. But there is a way to still do high quality and high quantity at the same time. So I stopped doing research almost a decade ago. Yet according to Doximity, I'm still the top 5% most cited doctor on their network. Despite not having done any new research in nearly a decade, I'm still top 5%, which means I was able to produce a lot of quantity, but also good quality, right? I'm not saying that this was life-changing research that, I mean, let me be clear, I don't think any of this is meaningfully transforming patient care, and because of my research, now surgical outcomes are, totally transformed and better. No, not at all. But having good quality research means that you're not just cranking out a bunch of case reports or going to these predatory journals. Please don't do that. Or going to, not even having peer-reviewed publications, right? So you need to have a certain level of quality, but you can also nail the quantity as well. It's not like you can only do one or the other. There's ways to improve your output and your quality. And that's why it took me 3.5 years to get 1/3 author publication in college, because I approached research like every other pre-med and like every other med student, because I followed the advice that you hear from other mentors and from online, and it just is not optimal. And then in medical school, that's when I truly innovated a whole new system, and I worked with other people as well, and we were sharing various strategies and creating our own, and that's what allowed me to produce those 29 publications by the time that I started plastic surgery residency, and those are peer-reviewed, right? This isn't just some advocacy work, something that I posted on a blog, etc. Like this is peer-reviewed research, and you can actually find the full list on my website, kevinjubbalmd.com/about. You're going to see all my publications, abstracts, and presentations listed there.
But the way I see it is like on paper, whatever you can, like there's the soft and the hard components. Anytime you're applying to med school or to residency or fellowship, you want to do what you can to optimize both hard and soft. So the soft is going to be your relationships, things like that. The hard is going to be your actual research count, not just research items, but within research items, obviously publications are better than having abstracts or presentations. And then oral presentations are better than poster presentations, obviously. So the hard components and then the soft components as well. There's essentially 3 things that I would want for you, and you're going to have to decide, your budget, your priorities. And I would just suggest like focus on the highest leverage. And I think the highest leverage right now is probably research, honestly. So the thing is with research, it compounds. So the sooner you start it and the sooner you start doing it well, the longer runway you have, the more your research output. So like what we try to get for all the students that we work with is 20 to 40% of your total research count should be publications. Rough guideline, but obviously the higher the percentage is going to be more favorable. The reason why we don't want 100% is like, well, now you have gains on the table in terms of you could have had twice the number of research items, but you just focus only on pubs. If you have 3 out of 18 though, where you're now, what's that, 1 out of 6, then it's like, well, the actual strength of the research isn't as optimal either.
Yeah. So
we're trying to find that 20 to 40% sweet spot. But by working on that sooner, you can compound that, and you can, dude, as a resident, it becomes so much easier.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like you can just
systems though.
You're gonna have med students that are doing sub-Is or whatever like that. And I'm like, all right, just please do like data collection, please. I'll put you on my paper.
Yeah, exactly.
So that rough guideline of 20 to 40 or 20 to 50% being publications ideally in terms of compared to your overall research items of your abstracts, presentations as well, is a way to make sure that you have enough weight. And as I was explaining, when you go too high or too low, then you just realize that it's suboptimal. So that's why we don't want to go too much lower than 20%, because now we're really going hard and heavy into abstracts and presentations, which aren't going to move the needle on your competitiveness as much. Again, even more so now with the 2027 ERAS changes. But again, even beforehand, a lot of residency programs are doing these internal scoring rubrics on applicants' research, right? These are based on multiple conversations I'm having with the doctors we have at Med School Insiders who are actively on adcoms, right? And we're talking about how are things changing year to year so that we can keep ahead of the ball and keep improving the advice that we're giving our students. So again, this has been a big problem. This isn't just a new thing that happened last year, right? This has been a trend that's occurring. And if you actually look at the number of PubMed indexed publications authored by medical students, it has increased over 7-fold in the past decade. The shift has actually been so substantial now that if you go back to 2014 and you look across most specialties, the average number of research items for successfully matched applicants back in 2014 is lower than the average number of research items for those who did not match in 2024. Just think about that for a second. That's insane. That means the floor has been raised so high by this research inflation that yesterday's competitive applicants wouldn't even clear the bar today. And that's not because the science has necessarily gotten better, but it's because this game, and again, I very much believe that it is a game, it has simply escalated. And I've maintained that this is a game since the beginning. Like, this is research for most students is a means to an end. It is not something that they are just absolutely in love with and want to do for the rest of their lives. It's oftentimes something that they do as a means to an end. That's just based on the incentives that we have around research right now.
There are multiple different strategies. So there's 3 of us that use different strategies. We each got 60 plus research items before we started residency, right? I went more brute force. I did a lot of stuff myself. I didn't collaborate too much with like people below, but I collaborated more with like equals, like other fellow med students. And I didn't delegate like lower level tasks essentially, where I just like collaborated in terms of my strengths versus the other person's strengths. But then also the kinds of studies I was doing, don't want to go too much case reports and like, remember pyramid of evidence, right? You want to search for the middle or the top of the pyramid, not the bottom stuff. Do a few reviews, do a few case reports, but not too many.
Now, the pyramid of evidence or the hierarchy of evidence is essentially the levels of strength, the relative strengths, I should say, of experimental research, especially within medical research. You don't want to necessarily be at the bottom. I think many students, especially with these, even before these ERAS changes, let's be real, but even more so now than before, you don't want to go too heavy on the bottom. That's never been a good idea. You want to be towards the middle or the top. Now, the top is going to be your systematic meta-analysis, your randomized controlled trial. Those are not quite as easy to just crank out. So you might have some systematic meta-analyses and maybe even an RCT, although less likely. Being in the middle of that pyramid is really the sweet spot where, again, you can optimize for both quality and quantity.
And the other 2 guys that helped build our curriculum, they actually won multiple research awards, and they actually built a research curriculum and program at their own school where they had other students help with research with each other. And like, it was really well done. And I learned a lot from them as we built this curriculum together. And that's what it's a matter of leverage where you can essentially use their playbook and get way more research items done by working with the med students and the pre-meds below you. The pre-meds and med students, they're stoked because now they're getting publications and all of your incentives are aligned. You go work with a certain, PIs or people higher up, they're not quite as motivated to crank stuff out. But the pre-meds and the med students are all aligned like, hey, we want research items fast. So people are moving quickly. People are taking their delegated task and pushing things forward in a way that other people usually won't. So I think right now the highest leverage action item for you would be research. I can send you more about our research distinction program. I think that would probably be the most important thing for you. And think of it this way too. What I would suggest is try to avoid a gap year if you can. So what it means is like the research distinction program is going to be an investment. I think it'll be a smaller investment though than the residency program we have. But it's like, well, if that investment amount, which is way less than the salary of a cardiologist or a hospitalist, can save you a year in terms of not having to take that hospitalist gap year, and you can just go straight into cardiology fellowship, that pays for itself several times over, right? So think of it like, this is what I have to do with myself too when it comes to like, I buy courses on AI and I'm investing in myself. I now have my guy that comes and washes my car, delivers my groceries or whatever. Like going back to our conversation, like these are things that I have to do for myself because, Indian upbringing, you know how it is. And I have to view things through like the lens of, okay, is this a positive ROI for my future? So I've dropped thousands of dollars on AI courses, which now like, have more than paid for themselves after a year or so. So research, I think, is going to be the highest yield. The second thing that you want to consider is like tutoring and coaching around your test taking skills.
Now, research still is one of the highest leverage arms that you can pull and can meaningfully change your competitiveness both for medical school and for residency, and in this student's case, for fellowship applications. He wants to go into cardiology. There is a very strong incentive for how much research can do for you, and there are some problems with that. So there was this meta-analysis of orthopedic surgery applicants, and get this, 20% of them actually misrepresented their publications. And they either had switched the author order or changed the journal names or claimed authorship of a completely non-existent article. Very concerning, ethically not sound. That stuff will just get you rejected because of integrity issues. Don't ever do that. These tactics I'm talking about are all, they're not even gray area. They're all legit. They're like very much white area, right? Not even to the gray. And you want to remember, you want to have good enough quality research that you are getting cited, right? So like I mentioned, with my research that I've done back from when I was in med school, I'm still top 5% cited on Doximity, right? But get this, about a quarter of all medical student authored publications receive no citations at all. That's because it's a ton of very low quality survey studies, low response rates, single department case series, just trying to get something to publish without thinking about the quality of that publication. And then, of course, wherever you have strong incentives, there will be those who are not even in the gray, but go straight to the black market, right? And just not playing within the boundaries of the game and just not abiding by these rules. And I think if you succumb to these temptations, it's going to backfire. Because remember, integrity is so important in the medical profession. There are these markets where you can just pay to play and you get your names on papers with just about any subject, really. And many of those papers are going to be written by AI. They're fabricated, pay-to-play journals, predatory journals, and this research pollution is not what you want to be a part of. And it's unfortunate because there's this growing body of junk online, and AI is getting trained on the information online. So it's generating junk and then training itself and referencing its own junk when you ask it a question. Not a good position, right? Things are going to be quickly getting out of hand. And again, as much as we are seeing medical education have these shifts over the years, competitive things will remain competitive. And there will always be incentives, regardless of what the thing is that we are now being measured by. There will be the incentive to try to maximize that metric. So it used to be step one, then step one went past fail. People are like, oh, yay, things are going to be less stressful for med students. Like, obviously not, guys. That's not how competition works. It just means that you shifted the pressure from step one. Now you just need to pass rather than hit a 270. Now it gets shifted to research earlier in medical school. So no surprise, the research items have ballooned and exploded since 2022 when step one went pass fail. And the unfortunate thing actually is that research opportunities are not equally distributed across various medical schools, right? Why is it that DO students have less than half the number of research items as MD students, right? It's like 10-ish versus 4.3-ish, I believe. Part of that is, of course, the specialties that they're applying to, but part of that is also just the opportunities for research at these institutions. And same issue with if you're IMG or you're in the Caribbean, Even within MD schools, some MD programs have more research opportunities than others. And again, I don't want you to feel like this is hopeless. There are methods you can use. All the tactics I used are very much fair game and legitimate. That's how I was able to produce the amount I did and still get citations. And again, the top 5 cited, yada, yada. Like, quality research is possible. You just need to be very strategic with how you approach it and not do it the way that most students are doing it. I was one of those students. I took the 3.5 years. I got my 1/3 author publication. Not great. And later on in med school, when I decided in the last half, the last quarter of med school that I wanted to go into plastic surgery, I was like, okay, gotta deliver on this because the research expectations are just so high. And again, the temptation is there. I get it. In 2022, around 15% of med student research articles were published in these journals with mandatory publication costs, right? And that's up from 3 to 4% in 2012. And this was only in 2022. I would wager that it is even higher now because, again, 2022, step 1 pass failed. The pressure has built since then. So it's probably much higher than 15%, but you don't have to play that game. So to summarize my overall thoughts on the 2027 ERAS changes as it relates to research in particular, I think it is a step in the right direction. Yet, I think many people are over-indexing on how big of a shift it is going to be for the game of research. It's still going to be very competitive. Research items are still going to be very high. There's going to be more of a focus on quality and quantity rather than just quantity alone. And again, remember that even before these changes, residency programs have been quantifying and scoring and assessing your research with their own internal systems, not through ERAS, but on their own, right? So the point I'm making there is that it can shift things a little bit, but it's not as big of a shift as many people are thinking. It actually is very similar to the discussion I was having on YouTube back in 2019 on step 1 going pass fail. The same thing where I think a lot of people back then were hopeful about this, this big massive change that's going to cause transformation. And lo and behold, it just shifted the pressure and things changed a little bit, but largely the pressure was the same and it wasn't moving the needle in as big of a way as people were hoping. I think the same thing is going to happen here. There are other changes that I think would be more beneficial to limit and cap this research arms race. And, the WMC has talked about wanting to prioritize advocacy work and other things in a way that I don't think are fully aligned with the 2027 ERAS changes, but we can cover that in more detail in some future videos. I think it would be very helpful if the NRMP would start reporting research not just as research items. Obviously, publications hold so much more weight than abstracts and presentations. So can the NRMP give us a little bit more data clarity? I think that when you are also submitting your ERAS application, we should make it mandatory that you need to have a DOI, a clickable link, so that you can cut down on the bad players who are trying to inflate their research with totally false research, which is, again, I don't recommend that. You are very likely to get caught and then not match into that program that you're applying to. But again, when you zoom out, these are all efforts to try to contain this monstrosity that has come out. There's been research inflation, not just amongst pre-meds and medical students over the last several years, but even in other domains. Just look at the logarithmic rise in junk research over the last multiple decades across industries, not just, again, in medical school. What you have to realize is that there are incentives. So it's like playing whack-a-mole. You can now try to cap things in research, and I don't think that these changes do fully transform the research landscape. But again, maybe a small step in the right direction. As you start playing whack-a-mole, though, what else is going to surface? So we already have so much more pressure on step 2 CK than we ever did before, and we now have more of an emphasis on research. But if you now whack-a-mole and over the next several years there are further iterations on this research residency clampdown, then what is the next pressure valve release? Because that competition, that way to stand out compared to your classmates, because this is a zero-sum game. Like it or not, you getting into your desired program means someone else cannot. It's not like some other aspects of life which are not zero-sum. Competition and competing for a limited number of spots is by definition very much zero-sum. Anyways, some food for thought. There will be additional videos both here on this channel as well as on the main animated Med School Insider channel covering research changes, ERAS 2027, and so on. So subscribe if you want to see those. Let me know your take with a comment below. Much love, and I'll see you in that next one.